Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the December meeting of Mallets and Manuscripts. Today, we have special guests Joshua Muetzel and Ethan Isaac. So we're going to start with Josh. I met Josh at SOCI in 2022 for the first time, and I got to know him better at SOCI 2023 this year, and I thought that he would be a great person to have come onto the call and talk about his compositions and his compositional journey. So, Josh, do you want to just start us off?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I see a lot of familiar, friendly faces. I mean, basically everyone I've seen before. Okay, my journey as a composer. I was pretty musical growing up. I played piano, I played guitar, but never really seriously, I guess. I took lessons, but it was never like, this is what I want to do. And eventually those lessons kind of really became annoying, and I kind of dropped any kind of music altogether for a little while until I was maybe 15, and I was really into dubstep. And so I wanted to like make beats. And so I had my little iPad 2, and I was like programming these awful beats on there, and that was kind of my first foray into composition, I guess. I knew I was going to make it big as a DJ. Like, that was 100% what I was going to do. Hasn't worked out yet. We'll see what's in the cards, but from there, I actually it was still kind of very much a hobby, and I went to Texas A&M for my undergrad, and I initially went to study biology, which a lot of people may know, but maybe some don't. I went to study biology because I wanted to do something practical. Gig'em Benson, exactly. And I went there, and let's just say biology and myself don't really get along. It was really not happy times. I did so poorly that I was kicked out of the College of Science, and was kind of forced to take a look at my life and what was actually important to me and what I really wanted. And at the time, that was really, really awful. But in retrospect, it was kind of a huge blessing, because it made me, like I said, take a look at things and actually kind of focus on what I actually wanted. And during that time, I was trying things out and like taking a class in this subject and this subject. And there was one class I took that was in the history of classical guitar. It's called Guitar Heroes, and I thought it was going to be a lot cooler than it actually was. It was just the history of classical guitar. Still cool, but not as cool as I thought. I did pretty well in that class, and that was kind of my first inkling that music might be my thing. The best thing about that class, though, was during one of our meetings, the instructor of the steel band at A&M came in and gave a demonstration. This is a steel pan. We need people to join the band next semester. Consider it. And I had always known that sound, but I didn't know what it was. And I mean, I always loved the sound. And so I heard this, and, I'm kind of thinking about getting back into music. And so I joined up in that spring semester of my sophomore year. And basically, I mean, that was kind of the big turning point for me in kind of coming to music. And so I started performing a lot in the band. It kind of became my primary instrument, was the steel pan, and I started writing a bit for the steel pan. At this point, I still was not composing any other music. I was only writing steel pan music. Let's see. Senior year, I actually directed the band. It was a huge thing. It was not worth getting into, but the faculty members went away, and so we had to save the band. It became a student organization. And so I was the president of that organization, which also meant I was the director. So really kind of fully committed to this thing, and I'm learning how to kind of teach it and play it and write for it and do all of this. Through all of that, I said, okay, I'm going to do music. I love this. I'm doing it. What I love most about it is writing it and kind of doing my own thing with it and creating. And so I ended up getting a music major with a focus in composition from A&M. That major does not exist anymore. Most people, when I say I got a music degree from A&M, they're like, what? Are you sure you got a degree from A&M? I was one of the last ones to get one, unfortunately. I think it's kind of coming back, but anyways. I lived in Austin for a year. I played in steel bands in Austin for a year, which was great. Again, kind of continuing that education. Went back to A&M, got a completely almost unrelated degree in performance studies, which is not a performance degree. It is an anthropology degree. It's a research degree looking at performance, which I'd love. I can talk about that all day. But I studied steel bands. I studied how they function as kind of ways of creating community. Anyways, okay, during that degree, I was like, I was still kind of thinking, am I gonna compose? What am I going to be doing? And during that degree, I was like, okay, I really want to focus on composition. So I got a second master's degree in composition. And for that, I wanted to, I was really still very focused on steel pan writing and performance. This is what I loved. And so I really wanted to be somewhere where there was a steel band and somewhere that I could learn from someone. And I got into a few places for my second master's, but I ended up going to the University of Denver, the Lamont School of Music. Number one reason because of the steel pan program there. It's not a program, you can't study it, but there is a significant presence there. The director, Tom Miller, is a very kind of well-known guy in the scene, and I wanted to get to know him and kind of learn from him. And I spent 2 years there, and it was really, really fruitful for my performance in my composition. And I am very grateful for that time. Thankfully, during that time, I also met they had great composition faculty there, apart from steel pan. And so it was during my second master's, which started around, I guess, 2020, that I really started composing with a capital C and like writing for these interesting chamber groups and orchestra and doing all this kind of stuff and really branching out in that way. And then now here I am in my second year of my DMA at the Frost School in Miami. I have not had a lot of steel pan in my life down here. I know Graham has. I need to get in with Graham. Graham immediately got plugged in, which is great. But I haven't quite yet. And yeah, okay. So thinking about percussion performance and composition. Well, last year, went to SOSI for the first time. It was my first summer festival. Before going to SOSI, I hadn't written any percussion music besides for steel bands. So that was a really totally new world. I met so many great friends there. So many of them are in this call right now. And that really kind of changed my perspective on everything. I fell in love with all the different sounds and styles and ways that you can both perform and compose for percussion. And from that SOCI until now, I mean, 60-70% of the music I write is percussion related somehow. I think part of that is, again, just kind of my love for it and also my background in kind of percussion with the steel pan. I really don't like to call myself a percussionist because I don't know my way around a marimba, or like, I don't know how to hold a mallet properly, but and I think also percussionists just in general are more kind of willing to play new music. Yeah. So yeah, I went to SOCI again this past year and got to know some people more and met some new people, and it's just been a really great kind of year and a half of percussion for me. And yeah, again, it's a huge part of my kind of output now. And gosh, I don't know. I guess that kind of brings us up to date. Yeah. Any questions about what I just said? Any thoughts, concerns, or anything?
I have a question. Sorry, I'm at Duncan. Do you have any solo music for steel pan at all? Or is it just for band? Mostly for band,
but in the since being exposed to this new kind of percussion world, I've kind of branched out into that area. So I have two. One is finished that Hannah's going to be playing for double seconds. And then I'm working on another for solo tenor. And then kind of dipping my hand into solo and chamber. Like I just finished a like a quartet. Thinking about writing a few quartets, kind of putting them together in like a book or a suite or something. But yeah, that is a growing kind of interest in mine. In I still do write for steel bands quite a bit, but kind of expanding into that more solo and chamber world now. Yeah.
Okay, I definitely I'll follow up with you more, and I won't take the whole call, but I want to see and hear like all of that pan music.
Okay, great.
I would love to play something.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love that.
Could you talk more about the scene in Austin and what you were getting up to with the bands there?
I can. I'm sure Lewis could talk a lot more in detail about that than I could, but for my own experience, basically, my last 2 years at A&M, I lived with people in the band there, and we graduated and we wanted to kind of keep musical somehow. And you know, Austin's like an hour and a half down the road, and it's this musical city, and so we moved there. And it was I didn't know much about the scene there, but one of my professors at A&M, Dr. Kim Kateri, kind of knew more, and so she let me know, like, hey, there's this guy CJ, and he's the steel pan guy there. And so part of my senior project when I was at A&M was I went and like observed him for a day, and he was going around to these high schools, high school bands, I mean, that he kind of was involved with, and running rehearsals. And so I was just kind of observing, and through that connection knew him. And he runs a community steel band called Inside Out, and that was how I got involved. was in that. It was really, really great group, very, like, not too serious, but still great performers usually. And I played a few concerts with them. And then, I mean, I was only there for a year, and then I was gone, and it was, but it was still great. And I don't know. I was going to say something, and it just totally left me. But I mean, for me, yes, exactly, Lewis. If you are interested in in steel pan performance and education and teaching it, it's going to be in Austin in February. I will be there. I'd love to see all of you there. I don't care if you know pan or not. Just come. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Lewis, you want to say anything more than I just did, but
yeah,
CJ's
I will.
Guy, and
I'll give my 2 cents before I get back on the road. But I went to McCallum High School, which is one of the high school steel band programs in Austin, and I played in Inside Out from 8th grade through current. And so CJ is the best. It's just like a really nice, warm community with ties to the UT Austin Steel Band, a bunch of middle school and high school programs. And the community there, it's something else, because there are people who are like senior citizens who will come in and just shred. And they bring in guest artists every year. And so through that, got to meet Liam Teague, Victor Provost, Andy Norell multiple times. It's a real hub for like thinking of steel pan as a concert instrument, but also as a community instrument. It somehow gets all of the like classical training with none of the weird classical superiority complex. And I think all of that is just based around CJ's personality. And so if you know anything about my work, or like why I think the way that I do, it's because I took lessons with CJ for like 5 years. And that's kind of it. Highly recommend. You should come to NSSBE. I'll be there too. We can go get really good food in really moderate weather at the end of February.
I will say too, that through CJ, I mean, CJ is just such a great guy. Through him, he has a publishing company that both Lewis and I are published on, and that was the first kind of foray that I had into publishing. So that was another, I don't know, great benefit of just being in that scene and getting to know all those people.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I am curious about is the like band rehearsals and learning music and stuff. How does it compare to like Pan in Motion and some like the more Trinidad based bands? Because like I know CJ goes down and plays in Panorama every year, and then because Lewis, you were just talking about the sort of like there's lots of like classical instrumentalists and stuff that play with CJ, and that's kind of where his like original training was. Just kind of that dynamic.
I mean, for my experience, again, in that 1 year, I think it was once weekly meetings for about maybe an hour or two, probably 2 hours. And like, it was, I mean, it's a very welcoming, kind of laid back vibe in those rehearsals. There's a lot of learning in the moment. There's time to kind of get your hands on the instrument, because I mean, at the time, I remember CJ let me borrow pans. I didn't have my own, and I was having a hard time, and so I needed to take some home. But for most of those people, I don't want to generalize. I don't want to assume, but a lot of them don't have their own pans, or they're playing the bass pans and they can't like take them. So there's there's a lot of space for people of all kinds of skill levels to get the kind of time they need. And there's like the range of music that we played was like a good range. It wasn't too simple for the people that wanted a bit more challenge, and it wasn't too daunting for people that were maybe trying it out. So it was a good atmosphere in that way, to where if you wanted to be involved, you would be involved in a way that was meaningful and good for you. And CJ was great about making sure that happened.
That's awesome. I know, like, CJ is one of the, and like Emily Lemmerman and those, like that crew is like the leaders of Pan in Texas and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear stories, because I've never actually worked with him personally.
Well, you should be there in February.
Indeed, I should.
Okay, Josh, do you want to talk about your works now that you submitted for the group to listen to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
How should I do that?
Well, I've got them pulled up. So if you have like specific instances you want us to like listen to, we can do that. Or you can just talk about them and like your thought process behind.
I don't think I have specific instances. If people have specific questions, I'd be happy to talk about specific instances, but I can just talk generally about them.
Okay.
At first, if that'll work. So what did I send? I sent. Okay. You want to show them, or should I just talk?
Yeah, I can show a little bit of them.
Okay.
Here. We'll start. You want to start with ripples, I assume?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a bit of ripples. I kind of started composing that the first soci I went to, and I was really interested in these. I had written for that first soci this quartet based on sound moving like across the stage, and there was a section in that of these basically just constant 16th notes that were kind of overlapping and increasing and decreasing volume across the ensemble. And this idea was kind of born from that. And I really wanted to, as accurately as possible, like create a delay effect acoustically. And so I wrote this really dry kind of, here's a delay effect happening the whole time, basically. And it was for an open instrumentation quartet. But and I was working on it kind of off and on all year, and then I got to soci this year, and we just, given the time and the constraints, just kind of decided it would be a snare quartet. And from there, since now I had these sounds in my head, first of all, I had to change all the notation to make it make sense. And then I wrote some, I guess, parts where the delay breaks down and then suddenly they're in unison or they're in these duos, and kind of wrote these grooves, and the grooves kind of move in and out of the delay effect. And it turned out pretty well for the amount of time we had it. They really struggled with it for the first few days, especially the second and fourth parts, because they're basically playing exclusively E's and A's the whole time. And they have to be at particular dynamic levels to make the effect work. And so in the end, I mean, it was really great. But that's how that piece kind of came to be. If anyone has any questions about that one, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question. How do you see it working with open instrumentation?
At this point, it might be beyond open instrumentation, just because what I wrote when I was at soci was specifically thinking of snares, of some kind of hit, kind of drummy thing. When I was originally conceiving it, it could have been pitched, like a chord, some kind of tetrachord. It was mostly just rhythms and this kind of soundscape kind of experiment and like that I was playing with. Now, just because of some of those other grooves I wrote, like there's a section in the middle that's like constantly changing meter, and it's like this 5/8 groove thing, and 7/8 like moving back and forth. And I wrote that so specifically thinking of how it would look on snares and how it would sound, that like you could play it on any instrument, but it would really change the kind of effect of it. I would say that, like going forward, if someone wanted to play this, I would always suggest snares first, just because that's how it would make the most sense, I guess. But I would be interested to see what it would be like. And in the original program note, I was really leaving it completely, like, very open-ended with how they interpret it. It was basically, here's 4 note heads. You determine, you all have to have the same sounds, just at different volumes. So as a group, you decide what these note heads mean. Like if it was flutes, for example, you could do it with a flute quartet, and you could do like 4 different articulations or something like that, or 4 different notes. Or if it's a vocal quartet, it could be 4 different vowel sounds, or different, that kind of thing. So if someone did want to do it, I would let them. And I'd be interested to see now with the specific snare changes that I made, kind of what would come out. Because I would be interested. Yeah.
To kind of like follow up on that instrumentation question, in the recording, it sounded like, at least to me, there were like 4 different snare drum pitches, and they were almost like kind of in descending pitch, like from 1 to 4. I wanted to know if that was like something that you did intentionally, like you thought about, or did it kind of just like maybe happen that way by coincidence in that recording?
So originally, I wanted the exact same like tuning, because I was obsessed with this. Like I wanted to sound like one person is playing a snare and there's a delay. In the kind of working through rehearsals and the materials we had on hand and the time we had, it just wasn't like necessarily practical. But also through the rehearsal process, we did kind of discover this ordered pitches thing and decided to run with that for this performance. So it was kind of this discovery that we made in the moment, and it was like, hey, that could be cool. Let's make them kind of descending and see how that sounds for this performance. So again, I could see it happening, being performed in a few different ways, but for that one, it was just kind of what we had on hand and what we as a group, kind of my players and I, decided that we liked and wanted to move forward with.
So would you want that tuning if people were to play with snares again? Would you want that tuning on like future performances, or would you want different tuning?
I would want a tuning that makes sense. So either
That's a perfect answer.
It's maybe a cop-out answer, but something that like is either the same. So that first idea I had of it sounds like one person with a delay, or something linear. Probably. I mean, with this, I'm so like, I'm wanting the performers to kind of put their own spin on it in some way, and the tuning could be a way to do that. And so I think it would make most sense if they were all the same or is moving in some direction. But if they do it and it kind of goes up and then down or something like that, or kind of jumps all over the place and somehow that sounds really cool, go for it.
Okay, so that leads me to another question, which is like, what do you see as the role of the performer? Because I know some composers, they put a lot of detail in the score. They're like, this is how it's going to be done. I want it executed this way. What are your thoughts on like the performer's role when performing composers' music?
You're talking in general, right? Not just about this piece?
Yeah, in general. For your music, not other people's music.
So I never want my music to be seen as an unchanging text that is sacred and mustn't be altered in any way, or else it's wrong. Certain aspects, especially for my very rhythmic music, where the rhythm and kind of the way that's crafted is the whole focus, then yes, like it needs to be played correctly, I guess. But if there are certain things open to interpretation, or certain things are particularly very hard to play or are like wrong, please tell me. If you're a performer, I write for any instrument. I write for whoever wants me to write for them. And recently I finished a saxophone and piano piece. I don't play saxophone at all. I wrote what I thought made sense and would be fun, But I'm fully expecting in that kind of situation for the performer for it to be a dialogue of, you wrote this lick, either, A, it would work better if this note was changed because of this fingering, or, I mean, even I think of performers, I don't think of them as, here, you are a tool to get my music played. It's you. I mean, we're all musicians and composers and creators, and we do it all. So I very much welcome any kind of interpretation. I really appreciate being asked about it, especially, and not just kind of going for it. But I like, music to me is all about interaction and collaboration and dialogue, and kind of it's a relationship. It's not just like I can have a computer play it perfectly the way I wrote it. I have very good samples, right? The performance is not about, let's get this sounding exactly what it should sound like. If that's what happens, that's fine. But I like that kind of relationship aspect of music. That's why I do it. So I love that kind of stuff. And as long as it's not like fundamentally changing what I wrote, or if you have a good reason for fundamentally changing it, just talk to me about it. Like I welcome that for sure.
Kind of building off of that as well, what, I guess, were some specific challenges, or what were some challenges with composing for like percussion specifically and snare drum? Because it can be difficult to write for snare drum, and because it's kind of limited. Of course, now some of the pieces that are being written for it are expanding it, but it can be sort of limited. So that was a loaded question, but what were some of the challenges with writing for a percussionist, and maybe even snare specifically, if you want to go into that?
So again, I'm not a percussionist. I play steel piano. I do not know what is idiomatic. Like, I'm learning, trying to know. I don't know what makes sense. I don't know what is possible. I don't know what stickings are possible. I don't know if I can ask for something insane and crazy, or if I would be laughed at for doing that in this moment, right? And so when I was rewriting ripples for snares specifically, and actually in general, and it's changing as I learn more, but I write like in my voice as simply as I can, basically, when writing for percussion. I'm pretty good at visualizing and imagining what's going to be happening. But for example, Sandbox Percussion was down here like a few months ago, and they wanted to do some readings of student pieces, and they asked for these very simple, like, found object things. And for that, when I was writing it, I was specifically thinking, like, with the strokes, there's never going to be a double. So it's going to be left, right, 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 in a way that makes sense. For example, with the snares, one moment I had written this flam. It was really fast flam, like happening after another hit. And one of the performers, probably not as soon as I would have liked, but came up to me and was like, "This is very hard. I cannot do this." And I said, "Okay, don't do it then. Just do a hit. Don't do a flam." And so in writing ripples, it was a lot of dialogue between the performers as well. And so right now for writing percussion, yeah, it's kind of a knowing my own limits and not going too crazy. But when I do go crazy, talk to a percussionist about it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Kind of tagging along, perhaps, did you check out any snare drum quartets or like any pieces of like inspiration or like relevancy to this work?
So,
like as you were writing or before, that sort of thing?
yeah, I cannot remember any specifics right now. I didn't look at any snare quartets. At last year's SOSI, I met a percussionist there, Liz Fetzer, for those who would know her, who was working on these solo snare plus fixed media stuff. And I was interested in that. And so for the past year or so before, and kind of while writing this, I was looking at all these solo snare stuff and kind of getting a feel for the different sounds people can make on a snare. So it was a lot of solo repertoire for the snare, but not necessarily quartets when I was writing this.
I was curious because it's pretty, well, it's not really similar at all, but it kind of has it could have drawn from like the John Luther Adams. Oh, what is he has a evening length quartet that uses like, it's like a movement for just tam-tams, a movement for snare drums. And it yours has a very different way of like hocketing all the rhythms together, and it's much more, quicker moving in the ideas, as JLA tends to take a while to get to the point, which I like. But and so I was just curious if that came about and if this was like a, if there was anything from there or not, which is really cool that there's not, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was certainly familiar with quartets in general, percussion quartets, and John Luther Adams stuff, but specifically looking at it, I didn't specifically look at it. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So just thinking about this piece and the antiphonal sonorities, which I had the pleasure of hearing in the dress, because we had the same dress that year.
Oh, yeah.
You have to me, a strong like visual component of the piece, and I was just wondering if that was like something that you always have in your mind, or if that's just like a result of how you work, that it always has these kind of like things that either swoosh out from the middle or with ripples, like all of them are doing it just slightly out of sync with each other. Just interesting because the physical movements look really cool and the idea is very expressed visually very well, I think.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do think visually, because again, kind of like I was saying, if I just want the music performed, a computer can do that. There's all these aspects to live performance, including the visual, that is a huge component of all the music I write. At least I try to do that, especially recently. I think antiphonal sonorities was an early one that I was like, let's play with space. Like this is live. Let's do other things besides sound. And so, but yeah, I mean, with ripples, certainly like this movement, and recently I just had this idea of writing a string orchestra piece, kind of like inspired by like a marsh, because I was watching the string orchestra play pizzicato, and all their bows are like sticking up in the air and kind of moving around like they're in the wind, and that'd be really cool to write this pizzicato thing meant to both sound like and look like what it's representing. So it's definitely a consideration. Not always. I mean, if I'm, some things you can't be as visual with it, but when you can be, I like to be, certainly.
I know I just last week watched Josh write a piece in collaboration with the dance program at Frost, which was very much a banger. You can totally be a DJ, Josh. And I'm curious if you have done any work with dance before, as we talk about like the visual component and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, and that's actually no. So, for context, at Frost, and in general, there's this organization called Society of Composers Incorporated, and we have a student chapter down here at Frost, and we do certain collaborations each year. We bring in like one professional ensemble. Last year was Arcs Duo. This year they're bringing in the Blank Experiment. But there's these like within Frost collaborations as well, and this year we tried out a collaboration with the dance department. And as a composer, we were paired with choreographers. And I was expecting to write some avant-garde, interpretive dance kind of thing, really, artsy. And after I asked what they wanted, they said, we really like Caribbean dance hall and like reggaeton. Can you write us like a reggaeton banger? I was like, I will try. I will certainly try to do that. So that's what Graham is talking about. As far as working with them before, no, that was the first time. That was the first time I worked with dancers. It was fascinating because so many of the like beats that I like, beats as in moments within the song that I put in there that I thought specifically they would latch onto and move in a particular way. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they latched onto it and moved in a completely different way that made no sense to me until I saw it. And sometimes they picked up on things I wasn't even hearing in the music that I wrote myself. And it was really, really interesting to see how choreographers who, feel music very, it's a completely embodied form of art, right? It's fascinating to see especially because I wrote the music and I thought I knew what was going on. I had no idea. It was great. So I would love to kind of work with choreographers and dancers more in the future. It was really, really great experience. I do want to make sure we have time for Ethan.
Yes. So do we want to go on and talk about Coralberry quickly?
We can talk about Coralberry real quick, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Is there a specific part of that piece you would like me to play?
No. Just jump in. Stop whenever you feel like it.
Okay. Do you want me to start at the beginning or the middle?
Let's start in the middle. Let's just pick a random part. Let's jump in.
Sounds good.
Okay, so that was bit of Coralberry. That was the, I guess, the last steel band piece that I wrote when I was studying with Tom Miller. Kind of a culmination of things that I had been learning and working on, and in a lot of ways, it was kind of the first steel band piece that I wrote that I actually felt like I grasped the medium. And I think it's my vision and what I was hearing really came out the way I wanted it to, which is great. I mean, yes, it was inspired by a bush. So if there are any questions about that, happy to answer those also. And if not, you can just vibe with it.
So I have a
What
question.
about, or go ahead, Hannah.
Oh no, go ahead, Graham.
I was just gonna ask, what about like this piece in particular made you? I think you just said like you quote feel like you grasped the medium more. Was there anything like tangible that made you feel that way about this one?
In particular, I think it's not that I'm trying to like copy what I've done, but I played a lot of steel band music, and a lot of what I wrote prior to this doesn't necessarily sound the same in certain ways. Like there are just particular elements, like we just heard, like the jam section. And I'd never written a jam section, and I'd always played jam sections, but I never had written one. Why? I don't know. Maybe I didn't know what it was. Maybe I didn't know how to go about doing it. But that's one way, and I wrote that. And it fits and it felt right, and again sounded like stuff I had played, but with my voice. And again, not that I'm trying to like disappear into the world of the steel band, but it made the most sense. A lot of the like chord progressions and the kind of movement of melodies and the way things flow just was better than anything I had written previously. Not that that's all trash. I think a lot of the old stuff is great too. I just think this one is the best example of kind of where I had gotten to in my steel band writing.
Okay.
Cool.
My question was about, so you talked about how you think a lot about visuals when you're writing for percussion. Did that have anything to do with your previous experience playing in steel pans? And do you think about the visual aspect when you write for steel pan as well?
Yes, in certain ways. For me, steel pan performance is a lot about movement just in itself, especially as the instruments get larger, especially the basses. You just literally have to be moving around and jumping all over the place to play it properly. A lot of it too, though, is I don't when at A&M we really tried to encourage movement in the performance of it, and part of that was just we wanted to put on a good show. Like the kind of music that we were playing, that a lot of steel bands are playing, is not this very stoic, very still stuff. It can be, but we weren't playing that kind of music. And so the juxtaposition of these basically kind of bored-looking players playing the notes, it wasn't the kind of vibe we were trying to put out. And so we really encouraged kind of movement, dance, just do a little bit of something. Personally, I feel like I play the music better when I'm moving around playing. embodying the music, kind of getting into the groove. So I think about that when I'm writing it. I also think about, though, especially with the basses, like kind of like a choreography. I played mostly tenor and six bass, and so I have a pretty good way of visualizing where in the bass the notes are. And it's not always the same layout, but often it is. And so I'll like in this one, or maybe another one, I literally wrote like a circle. The basses are just moving in a circle the whole time, and it's this visual thing, right? And yeah, it's harder to be to like, I mean, okay. There were two aspects I talked about. One was sound moving on the stage, which I certainly do all the time. Sound moving from the back to the front in the steel band and doing that kind of stuff. It is harder to kind of write, like with the snares, like these big flams kind of moving the arms around. You could do that with a steel band. I haven't. But yeah, I mean, it's always a consideration. It's just maybe comes out in a different way, I guess.
Do we have time for another question? If not, then that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So I was wondering, talking more. Sorry, this isn't specifically about steel pan music and stuff, but talking more about considering movement when writing. Have you ever, or have you considered ever, writing a piece where the movement was the point? Because that's something that I've kind of been thinking about. So I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Can you elaborate further on what that would look like? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give the example of what got me thinking about it. So I'm playing Ray Bonsby for some grad audition stuff, and there's a section in there that is like super physical, and you really have to move around. I mean, the piece as a whole is kind of like that, but there are a couple sections where you're playing on all the drums, and you really have to move and choreograph that to be able to play everything right. And just that feeling of being able to lock into this sort of like motion, almost like ritualistic is not the word, but this sort of just kind of like headspace that you can get into when you're playing stuff like that, where it's all muscle memory and you can kind of just like let your mind go. So stuff like that. Something like where either it's like a sort of headspace you'd be going for, or like a meditative thing, or like a visual aspect, like it would be super interesting to watch. Anything like that.
I do think that's very interesting. I have not, I guess, specifically thought about some of those things, but I think a lot of those things are kind of in the same kind of boat of where I'm thinking. Some of it is, yeah, overtly, I'm going to write this fairly simple music, but it's about the way it's played and how it looks, versus, yeah, like, I guess like getting into a particular mindset and like a flow state kind of thing. Kind of touched on it in a lot of my writing, but I've never really taken the full dive, but I could certainly see that happening soon.
Thank you. That was kind of a weird one, but I appreciate it.
Okay, so if nobody has any further questions, do we have any further questions?
I have more of a comment than a question.
Go for it.
I think it'd be fun if we had a steel pan centered rep day, just because I didn't realize how many pan people were in this call. But that could be fun if we all just like brought a pan piece and got that out of our system, and then talked about intermediate level marimba repertoire again. So just pitching that for future consideration.
Heard.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. And we have the form where you all can submit works. So if you all want to submit pan pieces, do it, and we will set up a day where we can talk pan. Okay. So without further ado, we're going to move on to Ethan Isaac. So I met Ethan same way I met Josh at SOCI 2022. Met Ethan again, SOCI 2023. And just we haven't gotten to it yet, but Joshua and Ethan are currently working on a project together. So I thought it would be good to have them both on the call and talk about their compositions and their life regarding composition. So yeah, Ethan.
Yeah,
good to see you, dude.
Nice to meet everybody again, mostly. I know everybody here except Clay and Louis. So nice to meet you both. Everyone else, hi again. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really told everyone my life story, so I can kind of go with that. I was born in the wonderful, perfect, beautiful state of New Jersey, where the sun is always shining and the turnpike always smells like shit. But the farms around the area are really nice. There's a lot of really beautiful trees and stuff. It's the Garden State. But I do love the turnpike. I wrote a whole piece about the turnpike, actually, if you guys want to check that out. But I was born in New Jersey. I went to public school. I was raised Catholic, actually, but my father's Jewish. And so when we go to church, he wouldn't do anything. And so I realized that I didn't have to do anything either. So my mom's kind of devastated about that. Now I consider myself more Jewish than Catholic. But I went to Bard College for my undergrad. I studied with Kyle Gann. I worked a lot with Justin Tonation music. I work a lot with text. I worked with a lot of poets at Bard. I wrote a few songs. That's one thing that always kind of keeps me. It's like whenever I'm really lost in a composition, I'll be like, shit, I'm gonna throw some text in there and I'll have something to grab onto. And those who know the piece, one of the pieces that I'm showing today, Ouroboros, can see how from the original score, those who knew that really was relying a lot on text to sort of bring this piece forward. I'd say as a composer, words often get me pretty far. But yeah, I grew up in middle class area. My father left to go to the Bahamas for work when I was 13, and I lived with my mother and my grandfather. Yeah, so that was kind of like a cliff notes of who I am. I have ADHD, always had problems with that. Those who know that. Wrote a piece about it last SOCI. Those who know that piece. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I went to Rutgers for my master's, and now I'm in University of Pittsburgh for my PhD, and I've just started that. I just did another text piece this past week. So I went around, I asked people a bunch of questions on stage, and I had them make really crazy sounds with their instrument. And then I asked them, what did they think they were here for? That was the ending. They played the answer. It was pretty interesting. So yeah, it's nice to meet everybody. Is there any specific questions about myself as a person that people have before we move on to the music?
I just want to say, like your dad, I also was just sitting in church a couple hours ago, stoic between pieces.
Nice.
I'm also raised Jewish and was playing a service, and so that was very vivid. I know that feeling very well today.
Yeah. I love Catholic masses, though. I think they're really beautiful. I just being a Catholic is something that I couldn't do.
One of my biggest gripes as a music student was learning what a hymnal was at the age of 20 and then being like, oh, this is what my ear training class was?
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The music's such a religious practice. in many ways, not just the historical context. But yeah. So should I talk a little bit about the pieces that I'm presenting?
Can you talk a little bit about your compositional process before we get into your pieces?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
I feel like for each piece, it's so individualized, which is kind of why I was like, oh, let's go with pieces. But like I said earlier in my sort of introduction, text often gets me motivated and is a big guiding force in my pieces. I actually am presenting 2 pieces today, I think, one of which is no text. And that was very hard for me to do. I would say it was very challenging. I have a lot of trouble like with motivic development, I think. I'm usually motivated through like emotional contexts of sound rather than like, oh, like let me subtract and double this value and cut it in half and fragment it. I don't really think like that. I'm usually trying to craft a narrative when I'm writing a piece. I think about form is more of a story rather than some sort of like geometric pattern. Although I do like geometric patterns. I would say as a composer, I also work at the piano. I mostly play a lot of improv at the piano, and then I write those out. I've done some of that sort of motivic development stuff with those ideas, but it often comes from play with the fragments themselves and just sort of trying to find new ways that they work together rather than doing any sort of plan. I don't have a big plan usually when I'm going into a piece, and I usually am very open to what people have to say. I love when performers have better versions of what I've written out because I'm not a percussionist, unlike Josh. I really don't know what I'm doing when I'm at a drum. I did play percussion in high school band for 1 year. So I played the xylophone in like a Christmas concert once, and I was really bad at it. And I was really bad at snare drum. Yeah, so I'm really a fish out of water when it comes to percussion. Although now that I've done 2 socies, I think I can handle it. So yeah, it's been interesting being at Pittsburgh. I'm like, oh, you're kind of a percussion composer. It's like, well, I kind of just thought I was bad at it, so I tried to force myself to do it a lot. That's a big motivation for me, is like, oh, this is something that I need to work on, so I'm going to work on it and face whatever sort of fears I have with it. Did that with orchestra. I like writing orchestra works. I've written about 2 large scale, and I've done 2 chamber orchestra works. So yeah, I'm not just interested in text, but when I'm not using text, I'm thinking in narrative, especially for form. Yeah. As far as my inspirations go, Charles Ives, big inspiration. I like Guillaume Michaud. He's a very old composer, Renaissance or earlier. I like a lot of Renaissance music, actually. Old plain chant and stuff such as that. Individual composers. There's this particular opera that I've been inspired by a lot. It's called Dennis Cleveland. It's very unusual. It's the setting of which is a talk show like Maury. And he's the main character is Dennis Cleveland, this talk show host. And the opening is like there's like people on stage, and there's a TV crew, and there's cameras, and there's screens up that are showing the audience, and it says like applause and stuff like that, just like a TV set. And he's walking around, and there are plants in the audience, and he's interviewing them, and he like almost like a preacher, and he's like, so what are you doing here today, sort of thing. And he asks them about memories, and that's the whole like concept of the pieces. It's Memory Day on Dennis Cleveland, and he starts interviewing all these people. It's all very surreal. It's quite an interesting piece. It's the whole thing's on YouTube. It's from around 2002. Yeah, so that's one of the sources of inspiration for me lately. Should we move to the pieces?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions before we do that? Okay. Which piece do you want to talk about first, Ethan?
Let's do Ouroboros.
Okay.
Has everyone looked at the scores for that? Because the old score and the new score very different. I actually would love to know what people's opinions are on the scores, both versions.
Circulation of dopaminergic urges, however temporary, nonetheless intensely, however temporary, nonetheless intensely, however temporary, nonetheless intensely. The sinking. In these self-unfulfilling promises. In these minor cycles of death, birth, in these tiny I'll do it tomorrows, in our constant rejections of others, in our little round and round, round and round, round and 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 round.
Can we actually show the ending?
The very ending?
Yeah, just to the last minute.
I chose Wix for my business.
Those damn Wixers. I'm a Squarespace guy. Josh, you're a Wixer? Oh, terrible. Weebly. All right. So that piece was kind of crazy. Those who were there for it probably know how insane the preparation process for that piece was. I feel bad. I feel like I stole a lot of coaching time from Josh. Me and Josh stole. Oh, we both had the same coach for that piece, which was Josh from Show Percussion, and Josh spent a lot of time just like working with everyone. There was a lot of improvisation in that piece, and a lot of discovery process built into that score, as you may have seen. The version that I showed you guys, the older version, was being built day by day per rehearsal. We would work on the pages that I had, and then I would come up with the next page the next day. So it was a really chaotic process for everyone involved. But because of the coaching and the like framework of the text, I was able to bring in everybody's influences. And it was really nice. McLean, Melody, and Rhiannon both really gave their all in that piece. There were a lot of things asked of them that they haven't done before, like text, like just performing text and improvisation, and and also just theatrical stuff. Like we didn't actually show the section where everyone was organizing their speech to read some of the things sequentially. That was something that's in the piece near the ending that we worked a lot on. It was really a rewarding experience. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. So this is something that I've wondered since I saw it at Stussy, and I probably should have asked you before, but how did you choose your text?
I wrote it.
You wrote it? Okay, I wasn't sure if it was picked or written, but okay.
I wrote the text.
Very cool. Got you. Well, then, for pieces that you do pick text for, how do you go about picking that text?
I really focus on the rhythms of the words, which is, I guess, why I do like percussion, and why I've kind of honed in on doing some percussion pieces and doing so for 2 years in a row, like me and Josh. It's really interesting how English itself has a rhythm, and each language has its own rhythm. And I think that English particularly lends itself to percussive instruments. I think it shows in a lot of popular music that we listen to. That's the main thing I'm looking for is the sound. Also, usually I'm just picking from people that I know. I don't like using texts from dead people. People have done it. They probably can do it better than me. I know some really cool people that write texts that are still alive, and they would be really excited to see their pieces, like to see music based on their texts, rather than dealing with copyright of like Walt Whitman. Like, how many Walt Whitman cycles can we write? How many are there? Like 7? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I just felt like I wanted to do new things, and hence why I'm a new music composer. Yeah. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes, Josh.
As far as the text, how do you approach writing text-based music for maybe people who aren't comfortable singing, where maybe you can't rely on pitch, like you can't write?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to have pitching from people necessarily. I mean, if I could have ran into somebody who's like, oh, I'm actually a really excellent jazz singer, or like a really excellent tap dancer, some people have that skill. Anna. But
I on tap dance.
Oh yeah. But whatever there is. So yeah, I kind of just didn't worry about it. I've tried to remove pitch from things and do that in my own way. I wasn't relying on skills that I didn't know people didn't have. I tend to, well, I guess I didn't know people weren't going to be like improvising that often. I wasn't expecting that actually, but luckily I knew that with the coaching that things were going to work out.
So I have a question about the score
Mm.
because I know we sent that out. So the score is not traditional.
No, I did make a new one. Did you see the new one?
Let me see if what I have is the new one.
It was on the website, I think. So if you go to the website link, that one, the link to listen to it is there.
Okay, 1 second. Let me find that. No, I was looking at the one you sent via email.
Yeah, that one is the performance one that they worked off of. That was, I felt very bad, but apparently it was fine. And I think that composers could relax a lot more. I after doing that, I actually felt like that maybe all of the work we do to put like our such official bound scores together might be just a lot of archaic stuff that is holding back some more adventurous notation practices. But then I realized I would have to be there to explain everything for the original score. And so I made a new one to try and
I'm not finding it.
It's not on the website.
It probably is, but I don't see it.
It's if you scroll down, I'll link it myself.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, I learned this morning from McKinsey that I should be using Google Chrome. So some of us are in the dark ages over here.
I use Firefox. So I don't use Chrome. There's nothing wrong with not using Chrome. Oh, Safari? Safari's okay. But yeah, I linked in the score if people are interested. People are muted if they are talking. Oh, there we go. So I did bring in some parts of the original score because they were good and they were actually pretty clear. But I did want to add in just a more traditional time scale because there was no way to really tell how long things were supposed to be in the other score. You had to be there with me and working in the rehearsals to figure that out. So with this new score, if you could scroll around a little bit, some more things are notated. Like some of the vamping is notated. Also, the text is really clearly notated when the rhythms are important. So that way, someone who isn't me can perform the vocalization part. That's the idea about this score, is that somebody could put it together, especially with there being that original performance as a video. It's not that hard, actually, to piece it together from the score now. So yeah, there's maybe one thing that I maybe would change in this version still. I didn't put the piano part for the there's a quotation from a Charles Ives song in this piece. The Round and Round is actually from a piece called General Booth Enters into Heaven, which is a really surreal text. I don't exactly know the political intentions of the text. I think it was critiquing the Salvation Army I know it was critiquing the Salvation Army. Now we have very different reasons to critique the Salvation Army, but I think the reasons that this poem had, where it's like thought that it was kind of rallying poor people together without thinking about like Jesus enough or something. I don't really know what the poem was about. It's really strange. It's about, there's a lot of lines about like being washed in the blood of the Lamb. And like literally General Booth, the guy who starts the Salvation Army, like enters into heaven and is like circling around with a army, and they don't notice Jesus. It's a very weird poem. But there's this section where they're talking about going round and round. And the idea of like people just like being ravenous and going in circles plays into the Ouroboros idea. If people don't know about the concept of the Ouroboros, it's a lizard or a dragon that's eating its own tail. And so because of that, it's just endless cycle. It's an alchemical symbol practiced in like the medieval era. That sort of stuff was important back then. And that's where this idea comes from. And the text of this piece is kind of engaging with the idea that we're kind of going in circles and driving ourselves crazy. In whichever way that we are doing that to ourselves. And I hope that I left the text open enough that there's room for people to put themselves into the piece. That was something that I worked on a lot, actually. When I was originally writing this, there was a very different concept. And then it became this very like somber, crazy song instead of a like, originally it was supposed to be about megalomania. So, and then it just became a completely different piece. Yeah. Did you have a specific question, Anna?
No, this new score makes way more sense. Just looking at the old score, I was like, how are people supposed to perform this? So
I had to be there. That was it. And then I fixed it.
Yeah.
I made a new score.
Sweet.
So if people are interested in taking a look, feel free and let me know if there are any critiques, because I hope that this is a better score and makes things clearer for the hopeful second performance of this piece. I've received a lot of like positive feedback from professors and from a lot of performers as well about the piece. So I think that that will happen probably in Pittsburgh sometime in the future.
So no Ouroboros picture in the new score?
I know.
Sad face.
I know. Ouroboros.
I love that part.
I think that I might try and I'll put it on the cover. If I ever like make if I ever organize that second performance, I'll do a few more edits to that score. Because I want to add the piano part back in or write. One thing I did add to the score was that since percussionists are the people playing the piece, and I probably not be the vocalist again. It might be for the second performance, but another one sometime in the future. There's an option to play the round and round on the marimba or some other vibraphone type mallet instrument. And I want to write something out maybe so it's a little clearer and so they don't have to stress about that. Or at least put the notation from the old Ives song into a staff so that they can see it in like an ossia staff. Yeah, so I'll probably add that back, the Ouroboros.
I think you'd be surprised how many percussionists can play piano, sort of, just because, we have to take 4 semesters normally.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And I mean, I can only play piano, sort of. So I would be happy to let them play piano. It's an option in the score. It's like if you feel more comfortable. And also, I would say for like practical concerns, there might just not be a piano in the space. And it might just be like, oh, we're playing this and I'm here in the stage setup. I can't walk over to a piano. I'm going to have to play it on a marimba. So I just gave them an option. I think a vibraphone would actually be the best one because it has the longest decay and would get that sort of similar pedal sound that the piano has, more so than marimba or xylophone. No xylophone for that. Mackenzie. Glockenspiel would actually work. That would be a good one. yeah, so that was a lot of the considerations. I was just trying to make things a little more practical with that score. Anyone else?
Cool. Do you want to move on to your next piece?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, most people know it.
That's true. Which part do you want me to start at?
Start at the beginning,
Okay.
and then skip to the second, third.
Got it.
Cool. So Hannah, you know this piece.
Yes, I do. I played on it.
Yeah. How was the experience? Can you go talk a little bit about the experience playing this piece?
So I feel like I have to put some context before we talk about this. So previously, before this, I had taken 1 semester of drum set lessons and I had played 1 drum set piece ever. And so when I was submitting for SOCI, I submitted that video because I was like, yeah, this is a good video showing my chamber skills. And I submitted it and then they were like, she can play drum set. And I could, but I think I was
very
a little
well.
out of my element jumping into your piece because essentially there's just a lot of polyrhythms going on between all of your limbs. So like your hands are playing one polyrhythm and your feet are playing another. And I was not at the point yet where I felt really confident in my polyrhythmic ability. So for me, it was really difficult. But at the same time, like, I think that listening back to it, I'm like, oh, this piece works really well.
You sounded really good. Everyone sounded really good together. Like
I don't know.
I know that there was a lot of concern, but I remember at the beginning I was like, oh God, I shouldn't have made everyone play polyrhythms in different parts of their body. Because in my mind, I've seen so many like YouTube percussionists, and they're like, check out this 17 against 1570. And I'm like, oh, it's not that bad, right? It's just 3 against 2. It's not bad. I thought that was like a reasonable. Like I had no idea because I didn't know anything about percussionists. I never met any percussionists. So that's why I was like, oh yeah, their foot will be doing one thing and then they'll do other things and they'll have all these other little things on top of that. The concept of the piece was inspired by, I was writing a paper at the time about Ben Johnston's work. Ben Johnston works with just intonation, and in just intonation tuning theory, they believe that rhythm and tuning are inherently connected, because the ratio of a perfect fifth is 3:2. And so that's the idea of the piece, is that you're playing these 3:2 polyrhythms. And because of that, you're getting this relationship of a perfect fifth somehow if it were sped up really quickly. I was doing research, and by research, I mean taking audio files and like looking at them really hard and like listening to them weirdly. And I was able to get some linear rhythms out of the perfect fifth that I recorded using like science. And it was really strange because you would expect those polyrhythms to show up, but instead I got beats. Like most of the like 16th note figures that they're playing are all sourced from this like manipulated recording that I had. And it was kind of grooving pretty hard. So I was like, yeah, let's make a piece about this. That's the glockenspiel bars are tuned to the perfect fifth. The electronics that are kind of happening are also like perfect fifth, sort of like harmonic series cloud of stuff that I used, just some EQ afterwards. The electronics failed on the day of the concert, which was fucking awesome. I loved that. I had a panic attack. I think I made everyone stressed. Anna probably remembers. Yeah, he didn't care anymore. Everyone was like, it'll be fine.
No, actually, that was not what stressed me out the day of that concert.
Yeah, there were the drum thrones people. It's a lot of drum. It's a energy. I remember during the coaching sessions there were a lot of talks like, this is chamber music. And like, don't necessarily think of it as for drummers, because when you get into drum set mode, that was something that we were talking about doing during the setup. And this is something I actually think about this piece still. It's like, maybe instead of having people sit in drum thrones, having them stand up and do a setup that's on tables would change the sort of vibe of the playing. Because I think having 4 people in drum throne mode, even if you're like the most mentally aware percussionist and like trying to do these relationships across the room to all these other people, if you're sitting in a drum set, you're going to be playing as if you're sitting in a drum set, versus if you were standing up, you would have probably a more chamber mentality. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's more of a mindset for the performer than necessarily like a change in elevation would change your mindset.
I think it would change some people's mindsets that aren't necessarily thinking about it as actively as they should, would be the thing. Like, I think for people that aren't necessarily as aware of themselves, they might be able to, like, just because, oh, I'm standing up. It's like if you're wearing a suit, you're going to act a little different. Like if you're wearing something nice, people feel different about themselves, sort of thing. Although I'd have to try it. I don't know. You're probably right to some extent. It depends on the person. But yeah. Any questions?
I'm also not like a drum setter, so that's
another thing. That could be another thing. But I think like because of that, the piece itself is not really a drum set piece in a way, because of the fact that you're doing these weird polyrhythms the whole time. And I'm also not really, I never written for drum set before. So I think the way that I wrote some of the like hand stuff just didn't necessarily flow in the same way a drum set performance would. I don't know. It seemed to go well. I thought it sounded great. It was the loudest piece on the concert. It hurt my ears. I was really upset I was so upset. Josh Quillen was like, "It's gonna be okay," because I thought that I hurt everybody in the hall. I'm just very sensitive. I think everyone was pretty happy with it. And I remember Josh thought it was fucking sick that it was so loud. I was like, I didn't know. I had no idea it was going to be that loud. And that's with the fucking towels on everything, and everyone went down to smaller cymbals. I was like, they can play quiet, right? They're just, it's like on the Dorico. If they put the P on it, it's quiet. That's not how it works. It was a great experience. Now I know one drum set, and that'll still be really fucking loud.
So, based on that, based on a lot of things just said, what made you pick a drum set quartet?
I'm stupid.
So, okay.
I was like, I like big drum, good. Put drum everywhere. I really wasn't thinking about it that hard. I thought that it also might be more comfortable to have a drum set. I just thought that just like sitting, I thought sitting would make things easier because I wanted the foot pedal. That was actually the real reason, is because I wanted the foot and the hand polyrhythms. I thought that would make things simpler. I was wrong, but it was really cool. A lot of composers will never tell you that. I will tell you, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had courage. And that is what it takes to tell 4 people what to do for an entire week. And also a long tradition of institutional power to reinforce that relationship. Because I think it's unbelievable that you all went and did that. It was really cool. I remember I showed up once and you were like, can you like tell us what that rhythm is? I was like, no. Because they're like, I think we're getting it wrong. And I was like, just play what I wrote. And I was not because I was like being mean. It's because I was freaking out. And I was like, I don't know what the rhythm is. I can't. And it's like, I know that if I look stupid, it'll actually be worse than if I tell everyone, just try harder. Because then the morale would be like, this guy doesn't even know what his piece is. What are we doing? So be aware of that when that's happening to you. It's part of a social game. It may just be the composers freaking out. We usually are. It's hard. Composing's hard. And I apologize to everyone involved, but also congratulations. It was a really wonderful performance. I actually really love that piece. It did get me into grad school. So thank you, Hannah. Yeah, it was one of my pieces on my portfolios for all my applications. So yeah. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. In the score, on like the bottom of page 11 and on, what like the 2 middle stabs are labeled as bot 1 and bot 2.
Oh, can you play a little bit of that section, Hannah? Maybe that's why that's confusing. Did you listen to it separately, Daniel?
I did, but it's been a couple days. I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, can you tell me like where I should start the video?
It's kind of I'm checking it right now. It's probably like 2 minutes in.
Oh, okay.
A little before 2 minutes. Yeah. Yep. Ding. Yeah, so there were some root beer bottles that I brought, specifically because I liked their tuning. I don't remember if I actually like tuned them to a fifth. We didn't put water in them or anything. I think the glass itself was made that way. And so I had them play on different parts of the bottle. I realized that I have actually, because I went to a band practice when I was a kid, I have a bag of percussion mallets that I still have. So I had rubber mallets and I tried them out on the little bottle. And I was like, ooh, there's different pitches on each part. And so I told them the top and the middle and the bottom were different pitches. And so that was the idea. That's why there are 3 prongs to that. At least I think that's what it looks like.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, I don't change the staff, but there are 3 pitches to the bottle. Is it actually in the instructions? I think it is. Huh. I think I need to fix that. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I actually don't put that in the notes. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I will fix that. Yeah, but that was the idea. Is there are 3 different pitches to those specific bottles. I don't know if that could be replicated in any way. They also stopped making the Virgil's root beer bottle form because of inflation. So now I have to buy cans.
Whoa. Wait. I drank like a bottle of Virgil's root beer like a week ago.
They don't sell the bottles at Trader Joe's anymore. So I don't know where to go to get them.
Well, you just go to Oklahoma because that's where I drank the bottle of Virgil's from.
Can you save a few of those bottles for me?
Yeah, I can do that.
Just keep 4.
Ship them out to Pennsylvania.
Ship them out to Pennsylvania. Because they're kind of vital. There's like a lot of symbolism for that for me. The Virgil's root beer in my like high school friends is like a thing actually. It would be like because we don't really drink. None of my friends really drink alcohol. Like from home, like my like longtime lifetime friends are all like teetotaler, like nerds. Like they prefer different types of experiences, and so we'd be like, "Hey, I got Virgil's, guys," and it's like a really good root beer. If you haven't had that root beer, it's really good. Hannah knows it's a really good root beer. Yeah, so that's the bottles.
Do we have any final questions?
Can we briefly go back to the discussion of standing versus sitting?
Yeah.
Because I played Renewal, Viet Cong's Concerto for 4 Percussionists, and it's 4 deconstructed drum set. So you're 4 players playing 1 drum set. And thinking about it in that terms of like, this is a drum set was totally not good for me. Like thinking of it as like a multi setup, I was like, oh, this is easy, I can do this. But then as soon as they were like, it's a drum set part, but you're standing, I was like,
it ruins everything.
So I think like that's great. I think it'd be cool to play your piece standing up because when I listen to it, I think I hear more of like a multi, you have 4 percussionists playing multi setups. But if it's like I'm trying to get across this like drum set groove feeling, I feel like sitting, it just goes back to like the personality that's sitting behind the kid.
Yeah, because it's not just your job as sitting at the drum set, you're supposed to keep everyone in line, right? So it's really antithetical to the whole concept of being a like typical drummer, is you're supposed to give people the beat, and it just didn't really work. I think it confused people, and certain things were more problematic than they could have been. You know what's really funny, Mackenzie, for those who were at SOC this past year, I wrote another piece called Tension Release. It's kind of the same concept. It was about quintuplets, and I honestly think I would probably use a very similar setup to that multi setup, which was, I think, what was it? Do you remember what the setup was?
I played bongos and wood blocks.
Yeah, it was a bunch of wood blocks.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of wood blocks, and I think some flower pots.
There were some pitches, yeah.
There were some pitches to something. I think the wood blocks were where the pitches were coming from. And I think it was just one set of wood blocks, right? 5 that were distributed to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
and then other people had some bottles and some flower pots. And there's also some like actual pieces of wood that people switched over to. And that created a way cleaner sound, and I actually really loved it. There were Glock bars again. They all started calling it Santa's Workshop because it sounded really cute, and I really liked that. I have a recording of it, which is actually very nice because I'm a great audio engineer, and everyone sounded really good on that recording. So not just because I recorded a really good recording, but because you guys sounded really good. And the performance at Small World was excellent. Totally different energy, which I appreciate that I got both versions. The recording is more Santa's Workshop. And I remember in Small World, they went really hard and it was more tension release. And I like both versions. And that was really exciting to have the performers kind of mythologize my own piece that way and be like, look, we're elves. And I was like, oh, it's so cute. And now this piece is adorable. Like all of these little sounds. It was so different.
I love that you were so open to it because you're like, this is the idea that we have. And we were like, no. We're elves. You're Santa. We're just gonna run with it.
I love that stuff. I'm always happy. I mean, like Josh has said, the lifeblood of any like nice composer is when the performers are like really engaging. And it doesn't matter how they're engaging because it's exciting. You know, oh, I never knew that this was part of this piece. I never thought of that. And just, you know, the beauty of life is that people can put so much of themselves into something that they didn't make. And in a way that, I mean, in very way, like very much so, this is the thing. That's an act of creation that performers are taking part of. And it's the best part. I think the writing sucks. I love when I see this happen. It's like, oh, like writing is so painful. You guys know, right? Hannah, Josh, who else is composing here? It's painful, right? You're like, oh, what do I do? Oh, what is this? Oh, should this be longer? And then you give it to somebody and they're like, this is really fun. And you're like, oh, thank God. And they're like, I'm going to just make it longer. And you're like, please, just do whatever. Just do it. Think sounds better. Yeah, it was really wonderful. Oh, I think now I would actually switch the setup to something similar to Santa's Workshop / tension release. I might actually go through and make the final movement to this piece, which would be like 8 against 7, which could be a pain in the ass, but no, Mackenzie, is it good? And so then it would be a 3.
7 is so cool.
Yeah, and then it'll be a 3 movement piece, and the setup would be the same for all of them. I think. I think I would add kick drums still, because you can play them. Do you guys think, as percussionists are all here, that it would be possible to play that piece with the kick drum behind you, and doing like the back foot thing for the multi-table setup where you have the kick drums behind you? Okay, then the piece will work perfectly on a multi-setup. I should probably just make that score like this week. It's not that hard. Yeah. Did we plug the consortium?
That's what I was going to ask you all about next, which is
Everyone's
what are
gone.
your future things?
Everyone left. So all the Soci gang, Josh, me, Mackenzie, and Hannah, we're all working on a consortium together. The 3 or 4 of us are putting together these 2 short tuned pipes and glockenspiel duos, both of which will be around 3 minutes each. We're open to changing that depending on how people are feeling. And we hope that people want to join and play this piece. The idea is that we're going to be dealing with religious experiences, actually. Lewis, you might be interested. Mackenzie and Hannah are putting a lot of themselves into the work, and as you know, me and Josh have interesting religious backgrounds as well, and we're kind of helping realize some of these experiences in sound, using some text and some other things. So there's a website. Let me get the website.
Maybe we could send it out to the whole email
Yeah, you should email blast it.
for people who.
I'll do that in the wrap up email.
Yeah.
But here's the link. I made this website using Squarespace. Our pictures are on it. There's explanation. There's the cost, and yeah, we hope that people are interested, and we're happy to answer any questions about the process. Yeah. Is there anything I'm missing, guys? Anyone have anything else to say about the consortium that are in the consortium?
I think the plan is that the pipes are going to be similar tunings to other pieces like Mo Halloran's pieces, so that you have these pipes and you're not having to make new ones just for these pieces.
Yes.
So I think that's something to keep in mind if you're interested.
As a percussionist, I did not remember that. That is true. They will be clapping. Yeah, because Mackenzie and Hannah played Mo Halloran's pieces at Soci last summer, and they were really wonderful, and they did a great job. And those tuned pipes sound fucking sick. And with my tuning background, I'm able to maybe like add a pipe or two that you probably already have, or just use the same set depending on what makes sense. And that way everything can be programmed together. And the two pieces that me and Josh will write should be programmed together. That's the idea.
Great. Well, it was great to have you all here today. Thank you, Josh and Ethan, for your time, and thank you everyone else for being here as well.
Yeah, of course. It was nice to see everybody again.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Great to see you all again.
Yeah.